So, welcome everybody. So, I am sitting here with this guy, and I think I figured it out. I'm supposed to point this way on the screen there.
Yeah, yeah.
That is Brandon Harris. He's the co-founder of Premier Fitness Systems. A little bit of background on him. So, he has his bachelor's degree in kinesiology from ASU, Arizona State University. So, we're both Phoenix, Arizona guys. He's been training athletes since 2002. He trains a bunch of professional athletes. So, like AJ Pollock from the Dodgers. Another guy from the Diamondbacks, Levi Kelly, who also does Jiu Jitsu now. I saw him at Jiu Jitsu World League a few weeks ago. And if you're watching this on video, he probably looks familiar, and you're trying to figure out, like, where the hell have I seen this dude before with this giant beard? But you may have seen him on the UFC's Embedded because he also trained Sean O'Malley. Is that right, Brandon?
Yes, sir. Yep.
So a couple of other things to know about Brandon. Like I said, he's a fellow Phoenix guy, so we're in the same city, but we're in different locations, obviously, as if you can see from the video. If you don't follow him on Instagram, you should, because this dude is shredded. So he's Brandon for PSF or PF, and then he also has a new podcast coming out called Human. So thanks for coming on, Brandon. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity to connect for sure.
And so, before we jumped on, we were talking about it, and you have a new challenge that's coming up. So other than the fact that you need to breathe to stay alive, what is the importance of, breathing in our training and breathing to help us just with overall health and those sorts of things?
I think it's the foundation of how we move. So the way you breathe is your posture. So that's extremely important if you think of it from a health, longevity, and athletic standpoint. But it also is this gateway to our nervous system and to our mental state. So as an athlete, as a BJJ athlete or any type of athlete, your ability to control your mind is so important. And I think a breath work practice and just moving in that direction and tapping into that is just so fundamental for so many things. It's really important. It's changed my life dramatically for the better. So that's kind of my goal, is to be able to help people understand how it can have a positive effect in their lives.
Awesome. And I know I saw something you were doing the other day where you were like hanging sideways off of a pull-up bar, like knees to chest, and then also doing some breath work combined with that, right? So
yeah,
how does that help us, or how does doing that kind of work, what does it do for us?
I'd say, it's a great question, right? So there again, there's a lot of different ways that breathing can be brought into your practice. That type of breath work is going to be more understanding how to create a brace. So how to use the diaphragm effectively and efficiently to then be stronger. So most people would have a connection with like a powerlifters, or they, familiar with like a weight belt. Well, a weight belt is a way to give you feedback for, are you using your diaphragm correctly? So that type of movement is more, can I breathe and create this intra-abdominal pressure that will help me be strong? Which would be fundamental for, again, a BJJ athlete, right? You get grabbed, somebody grabs you, they get your hands on you, like your ability to create a brace and be strong is definitely correlated with your ability to use your diaphragm. So, and there's just so many ways that breath work can be integrated in with our practice.
Yeah, and I think, part of the reason I'm bringing that up is because I know most of us don't pay attention to that at all, right? It's all right, I'm not getting choked, so I'm breathing, so I'm good. But you need to be a little bit more intentional than that, for sure. So
sure.
Let's take a little bit of a step back. So I mentioned that, you train a bunch of professional athletes. I know you train some baseball players, some basketball players, and some UFC guys. How'd you get into kind of training in general?
So I played baseball as well, like I know you said, and grew up playing baseball and got to, I had, always had goals of playing at a higher level, and had some like small opportunities to play in college, and instead took an academic scholarship to ASU, and just really kind of struggled with finding my place and my purpose there, and stumbled into kinesiology, which I just fell in love with, because I was always really interested in the body and performance. And that led right into coaching training for, personal training at first, which is a little bit different. And then that carried into opening a gym that now I've had for almost 11 years. And then that led to working with different athletes. And I think really just, my advice for anybody is just to work, to constantly try to grow. And I think that's what opened those doors, is as I became better at my craft, I started to have opportunities to help different types of people. And really, I think jujitsu is I mean, I've practiced a little bit of jujitsu. It's something that I would love to get into more. But one of the things that I've noticed is it's just people that do jujitsu really quick, I think, become aware of this endless opportunity to grow. That like you're just scratching the surface. And even as a black belt, like you meet black belts that are like, man, I've just started this thing, which is so cool because I think that's fundamental for us as humans. Like if we don't have something that we're working to grow at, we're a little lost. So I love it. I love the tribe, the environment that jiu-jitsu athletes have, for sure.
Yeah, for sure, right? If you think you know it all, that basically proves you don't know shit, because you're
Right. Yeah.
always way more you can learn, regardless of how skilled you are and that sort of thing.
Right.
So, when you're working with your athletes, what kind of training are you doing?
It depends, right? It really depends on the relationship and the role that I fill with the athlete. So, that's something that I try to be an extension of the athlete's team. So that could be a baseball player in their organization, right? It could be it could be a fighter that maybe I'm not operating as the head strength and conditioning coach. So I fill a role. So I don't want to butt heads. Like I want to make sure that, there's synergy. So it really depends on what my role is, and then the athlete themselves, and what gaps or what holes do I think need to be filled from a strength and conditioning standpoint. Maybe there's a mental, a mental piece, but but I think that's part of what makes it so cool and so beautiful, is it's very dynamic depending on depending on the relationship and the goals.
So do you do like an initial, not like questionnaire, but you do like an initial assessment to figure out, like, okay, hey, where is this guy at? And then from there, you kind of develop a plan, like, all right, here, so I can help him fill some of those gaps. Is that about how it works?
For sure. Yeah, I kind of think of it as like a needs analysis. So what are your goals? What's the history? Do we have injuries? Really try to break that down, evaluate movement, evaluate joint positions and joint range of motion, and then decide, like, okay, what's the direction we need to take this with again, ultimately the goal of enhancing the athlete's ability to use their athleticism. Like that's kind of the way I look at it, is it's a little bit of a puzzle. And how does strength and conditioning, how does training, how does movement fit in to help that person be more successful at their sport?
So what does it look like? Like, how different is the training from, let's say, a professional baseball player to like when you're working with Sean O'Malley? Like, are they doing the same things, or is it completely different, or somewhere in between?
It's in between, and again, it depends a lot on the person. So I think I try to look at it as we're all humans first, and there's like this fundamental, foundational, you know, uh, circle that we need to fill first. And typically, what you'll see with like really elite athletes is they're they're so good at their specialization, but they lack in other fundamental things. So they might be, it's like they might be a black belt in BJJ, but they're a white belt in the gym, right? So the trick there is, if you pull them too much away out of their specialization, you could have a negative effect on their sport. Like I really believe that, and I think strength and conditioning coaches will mess that up. Is they'll try to pull them in to like be a weightlifter or whatever, when that's not what their sport is. So that's again where it gets kind of complex, and it's kind of this dynamic nature. But there's this human layer first that I think typically needs to be filled, and it's like this: can somebody breathe? That's probably number one. Do they have a good connection with their body? Is their sensor motor awareness good? Do they manage planes of motion well? So, do they manage the sagittal plane? Do they manage the frontal plane, transverse plane? Like, can they move in that plane and still kind of hold the position? And then once that's established, then now you can get to some of the more advanced stuff, if it's even necessary, right? There are times when I think that might be it. Is someone is so good at their sport that you could probably do them more harm by pulling them away. So we're just trying to restore some type of balance to the system.
So when you talk about planes of motion, I assume you're talking about like how, the shoulder moves, right? For like a pitcher, like throwing like this, or for a fighter, right? The rotation of their shoulders and their hands and that sort of thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. It's kind of basic biomechanics, I guess, where we have the sagittal plane, which is more of like bilateral, really kind of, it's not one-dimensional movement because it never is, but it'd be like more of your simple movements. And then frontal plane, which is slightly different. Transverse is where we start to bring in three-dimensional rotation. And it's like athletic movement is typically always going to be transverse. It's multi-dimensional movement, right? It's multiple plane. But if somebody doesn't own the sagittal plane, like if they're not good in the simple plane, they're probably going to struggle in the transverse plane. Things are going to break down. So it's like a simple way to back it out so you can move it forward, right? If somebody can't do a simple hinge, like a deadlift, they're going to have a hard time doing a step in a punch with weight or whatever. They're going to have a hard time throwing a kettlebell into a rotational movement. So it's like you need to back things out. Like if you're breaking down things, a good example would be you're learning Jiu Jitsu. You don't take somebody day one to the advanced movements, right? You nail the basic movements first, and then you progress it out. So I think it's the same way in the gym. Is, to be honest, it's a good way of looking at it. Is the gym, it should be looked at like a martial art, but it's not. A lot of times it's a workout, right? So the coach takes a person and they just beat them up, but there's no breaking down of the movement so that it's more skill based. So that's probably a decent way of looking at it.
So when you're working with them, do you do more like powerlifting movements, or is it more kind of functional where you're replicating some of the movements that they do in their sport and just adding, more efficient movements along that plane?
It's both. So, and I'm going to move spots here. I feel like I'm outside, so it's like I can't see it. So now I'm changing. So hopefully that might look a little bit better, different, but it's both. It's they're all just tools. And I think powerlifting, Olympic lifting is a really valuable tool. It's just it's a skill. So if you're going to use those models, if you're going to use those tools, you better make sure that you're doing them well. And again, it would be like an advanced BJJ move. Like if somebody's going to, I was watching the fights last night, and they're talking about like a twister, right? I forget whose fight it was. Now, I don't know what that is, but I'm assuming that like it's an advanced move that maybe not everybody has, and the fighter didn't have access to it, or at least it didn't look like it'd be like that. Like if you're going to do an advanced powerlifting or a kettlebell move, there's risk. So you better make sure that person has an understanding of how to execute it correctly.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's kind of jump into just kind of the fight access of it. What are some of the strength and conditioning things that us as fighters, whether it's MMA or just jiu-jitsu, that we should be doing to, keep our bodies in check, keep us strong, those sorts of things?
So I think if you're looking to compete at a higher level, I think it's similar to a UFC athlete, right? In that there needs to be a base level of an aerobic base. So a lot of times what I notice with fighters is everything is high intensity, and because that's what the sport looks like, but there's a lack of a base level aerobic conditioning. So it's like a lot of times it's that. is building that aerobic base, which is the slower, longer stuff that is a little bit different than what you would be doing while you're rolling. So building an aerobic base, I think, is a really good thing. That's longer duration, lower heart rates. So it's kind of the boring stuff. It's, go out on a 45-minute run, ride your bike for 45 minutes in a lower heart rate. Typically that's probably heart rate under 160. So you almost feel like you're not working that hard, but you just, your aerobic fitness just starts to come up. And the bigger your aerobic fitness is, the bigger that base is, the better you are at using your power system. So you're in a fight and there's this grappling exchange and it's high intensity and it's power, and then it kind of stops and you find yourself on the ground. The person that has a better aerobic base will recover quicker. So that's important. And then I think the mobility and just movement variability is really key for a jiu-jitsu athlete, right? Having the access to the multiple planes, having good fluidity is extremely important in your sport.
So let me ask this. I know that there's kind of different camps. Some guys kind of combined strength and conditioning to their a la like more CrossFit kind of stuff. Some guys kind of separate out.
Yeah.
Where they do like, powerlifting or more strength-based movements, and then they do running or cycling or swimming or those sorts of things. What do you see as far as what's best for a fighter?
I think you need both. So not to say that they can't be combined or that they couldn't happen in the same training session. That again would depend on the athlete, but you want both because they are different. They're different skills that you're building. And I think the really elite fighters have both, right? They're powerful, they're explosive, they have really good endurance, they have good resiliency in their ranges of motion, right? So you want to be able to build both, and you want to have, I mean, ultimately the real key is having some type of plan that's built out that says like, here's what we want to get. Here's how we're going to evaluate where we are and are we making improvements, and then moving forward. And the tricky part in fighting, at least with the MMA athletes, is there's typically not a lot of time, right? So to really make significant gains, you need consistency, you need progressive adaptation, right? There needs to be that kind of structure, and you don't always have that time. So you kind of have to look at it from more of a macro perspective. But yeah, where do we want to get? What's the vision for this person? And then how are we going to execute that plan over the course of months and years?
Nice. All right. So, I think you talked a little bit about recovery, and, if you do, you just go ride a bike for 45 minutes, that actually helps you recover faster,
Right.
bowling or those sorts of things. But what about more traditional types of recovery, like after you work out, like ice baths, sauna, those sorts of things? What kind of things should we do to help our bodies? Because we do beat the shit out of ourselves.
Yeah. It's an interesting one again, because I think the like a lot of the latest research on, say, ice baths is because it kind of blunts inflammation. It's good for recovery, but it potentially has a negative effect on the gains that you're going to get from your workout, right? So
Slows the blood flow just kind of fill in the muscle tears, right?
yeah, exactly. So I guess it depends on what matters more. If you're looking to recover, and also the mental benefits of like ice baths, I think trump everything else. So I would say for most people, if that's something that they will do and want to do, doing that as a recovery modality is still great. Like the mental benefits outweigh that potential decrease in inflammation that might have a slight negative effect on the progress of the tissue. But in a perfect world, maybe you would do that a few hours after you train. Like it would be a nightly thing. But the heat, the ice, those are, I think they're great modalities to help somebody recover. And if it helps you with your sleep, if it helps you with quieting your mind, those benefits are really, really powerful. Maybe the most powerful that you're going to get.
So how long should we spend in the ice bath? Because I will totally admit I hate cold water. So I
Yeah.
intentionally avoid it. I instead go to the sauna. Like I can suck it up in a sauna for 30 minutes. Way easier,
Yeah.
like 5 minutes in an ice bath.
Yeah. I'm the same way, man. But it's like, if it's cold enough, 3 minutes, I think you're looking for a like physiological shift. So the shift is, it's kind of an oh shit moment. It's a fight or flight. And then you breathe through it and you get that shift, or you can see it in somebody. They go from kind of panic to calming down, their breath slows down, the exhales get longer. There's a good shift, like a sympathetic fight response to a rest, recover, parasympathetic response. And then you've got it. And then it's like, really, probably at that point, the majority of the benefits have happened. And if you stay in longer, there probably is a slightly more benefit, but that's it. So it can be a quick thing, a couple minute thing if it's cold enough. And I was actually just, I was talking to Sugar about this, and he's really good at using ice. And the point he brought up, which I thought was just a really cool testament to him as a person and a fighter, is it's when you put yourself in an uncomfortable environment, you appreciate the comfort. So you could just look at it like that, right? It's, get your ass in the ice. It sucks. It's not easy, but you embrace it. You accept it, that it's just pain. You get through that. And then when you go at night, you get in your hot shower, or you lay down in bed with your spouse, like, you're going to appreciate those moments more. And that's a powerful thing. Like, I don't think we're intended to be comfortable 100% of the time as humans. So again, jujitsu is, I think that's, people fall in love with this sport because probably a big piece of that uncomfortableness that you get is primal, is important. And you're done at the practice, and right, you're like, I love everybody, right? Yeah, I love my brother. You go home and you're better with your wife. There's probably a big piece of that plays in. So
For sure. I found that uncomfortableness actually helps me in real life, right? Because in
yeah,
real life, if I go into like a business meeting or something, nobody's going to try to choke me unconscious, or they're not going to try to
right,
break my arm, right? And so
right,
it
yeah,
makes me much less nervous or apprehensive when I go into that, because I know the night before, again, some guy was trying to choke me out. So yeah, that being uncomfortable makes you more comfortable in a lot more situations, for sure.
for sure, yeah.
So I know, you're not necessarily a nutritionist, but obviously, you take great care of yourself and you work with fighters. How big of a role does nutrition play in our overall health and fight preparation and strength and those kinds of things?
It's probably the biggest piece. I think so. I think, if you look at kind of low hanging fruit, and not to say that nutrition is easy, but like, that would be maybe the first one I would pick off. And then sleep, and then those things are going to play into your training, right? I think the way you want to look at it is, if you're trying to optimize your training, you want to look at what you put in your body is huge. So I think you start there and you work on cleaning that up, and then everything else will fall into its the right spot. So it's huge.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about, kind of getting ready for a fight, right? You've worked with Sean for a while now. What are some of the things you've learned on the training side leading up to a fight? Like, let's say he has like a 6 week camp or an 8 week camp. Where do you start like 8 weeks out, and then what does it look like, let's say, a week out going into a fight?
So it definitely varies. It's varied with him because of where he's at, right? So he's progressed a ton. So we have a different foundation. But generally speaking, it's the a lot of the work takes place outside of camp. Like, that's the one of the conversations Sam and I always have, is like, you grow outside of camp. Camp, you're fine tuning. So during a 6 week camp, it's not the time to try to dramatically increase somebody's strength, right? You've done that outside the camp. Now you're fine tuning your like your kind of tunnel vision everything into what the person needs to be successful, you're also prioritizing health. So I think that's a big piece. Is the MMA load will go up, the sparring goes up, the total volume of MMA goes up. So to be honest, strength and conditioning now needs to decrease to a certain degree. And it probably shifts more into fine tuning the little pieces and making sure that the athlete feels good, is recovering well. That I think is really, really important, because again, you have to prioritize MMA. I would rather him get good training sessions in with his jiu-jitsu coach, with his head coach, and then strength and conditioning is there to assist those pieces, because he's not a weightlifter, right? The athlete's not a weightlifter. So that's I think really important in it from a strength coach, is to be humble enough to say it's an important piece, it matters, but it's not the number one piece. Because I can't tell you how many times I've seen some of the best fighters, baseball players in the world, that you look at what they do in the gym and you're like, that's, from my perspective, it's bad, but they're still the best at their sport. So with that being said, it's like, like getting a person better at doing whatever it may be, a kettlebell swing, a bench press, isn't necessarily what's going to make or break them from being a world champion. So
what does that look like from a practical perspective? Like, are they doing, strength and conditioning work like 2-3 times a week, and then they're, doing Muay Thai and Jiu Jitsu 6-7 times a week? Or what does that balance sort of look like
in a fight camp?
Yeah.
Again, I think it varies. I think you want a model that appreciates the up and down nature of the human, meaning you don't want to force a guy or a girl into a high intensity, all out training session when they're off. But in a camp, like you have to also go, right? Like, it's not a time to say, I just don't feel like doing it today. But there's a weird balance between that. So I think you want some type of system in place that can at least monitor that. So I try to have a really good relationship with my guys or my girls, of saying like, hey, if when I ask you how you feel, I want you to be honest with me. And you get to know that person, right? To where you see them, they're just a little off. So maybe we make an adjustment there. Maybe the week looks a little bit different, but it's still a fight camp. Like, the person's going to feel off. Typically, say with Sean, we're doing three, maybe 4 strength conditioning, with one of those being more of a full recovery training session, breathing, moving, stretching. And then we'll prioritize a lot of his conditioning will also come on his own. Like, he knows we look at like a week by week, and here's your goal today. And then it gets integrated in with his MMA as well. So I think there needs to be synergy between those two to a certain degree. So if we start off and it's like we're working say the goal is anaerobic power, which is like all out, and it's decent amount of recovery, that can be integrated in his MMA training. So then his coach understands, like, okay, hey, I want you to, let's push him really hard and then give him recovery. Or maybe it's a mild heart rate, and it's just rhythm, it's just technique. So it can be integrated together as well.
You mentioned, stretching, flexibility, mobility, that kind of thing. What are some things that as fighters we should be doing to help / improve that aspect of our game?
I think a good daily, nightly, maybe morning routine is really powerful, where it's down regulating the system. So your breathing is probably priority number 1, and then learning to move and connect with your body, right? I think stretching is really beneficial there. It's a great gateway to connect the mind and body. And it doesn't have to be super passive. Like, it doesn't have to be just holding. It can be, moving and kind of flowing and breathing. But it's a great way to down regulate your system, and that helps you sleep better. That helps you clear your mind. So I think integrating that into your routine in some way, 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes can work. I mean, it can be an hour, right? But a minimal, just slowing down and giving yourself that opportunity, I think, is really powerful.
And with like stretching and mobility, should you start with more dynamic movements, meaning you're kind of getting the blood flowing and then go into static? Because from what I've heard, right, if you just jump into static, it's not that great for you.
Yeah, generally speaking, yes. So if you're warming up, you want it to be dynamic. Like if it's maybe the first part before you go roll, right? You're kind of getting everything going and learning how to move and breathe, I think is really powerful. If it's, at the end of your day and it's a down regulation, I think even there, before you just go into holds, just moving a bit can get the blood circulating. It's just a slower tempo. But I think generally where that comes into play is people talk about you don't want to static stretch and then ask your body to be explosive. So if I was to go, touch my toes and breathe for 5 minutes and then get under a bar, that doesn't make any sense, right? You're asking your nervous system to do two completely different things. So dynamic stretching, dynamic mobility, dynamic movement prior, that progress that into even more dynamic before you're doing whatever you're going to do. And then at the end, you can down regulate. That can turn into more of like static, which I think is more of a mind thing anyways. It's more of a breathing mind thing.
So let me ask this again. I know you work with lots of professional athletes. How would you vary the training between a professional athlete and those of us that are hobbyists, right? Like we have like a real job, from,
Right.
8 to 5-ish, but we still, do MMA or do Jiu Jitsu on the side. How should we train differently than those guys?
Right. Depends on the person and what their goals are and how serious they want to be. I mean, you could take an average Joe and train them like a pro athlete if they want that, right? It's probably more of looking at a pro athlete. You're chasing maybe a 1% increase. Like they're so elite that 1% is huge, right? You take the UFC athletes, that 1% might make the difference between a world champion and a non. Your average human, you're not chasing 1% increase typically. So then it's more about health, longevity, strength, power, those things play in. But that can be kind of fun because there's a little bit less pressure, right? It's like if you take a 40-year-old dad or a mom and you help them eat healthier, sleep better, move better, that has a significant effect on their quality of their life. The pro athlete, you're chasing these little gaps. But with that being said, if you're a dad and you're doing jiu-jitsu 3 times a week and you want to get down to the nitty-gritty of getting better at something very specific, I think that can be the plan as well, right? It's hey, what do you, I mean, I kind of trained myself that way, right? I'm looking at, I want to be healthy. That's the idea with higher humans, is this, I want this balance, the yin yang of being strong, capable, powerful, and then also having this other side that I can tap into a spiritual connection, a really slow breathing connection. And I think that's what that represents to me. But I'm still chasing, doing some cool stuff.
For sure. So, you mentioned a 40-year-old dad. I'm not 40, but I'm pretty damn close.
Right. Well, hey, I'm there. So, yeah, we're good, man.
All right. So for those of us that are a little bit older, how should it at all, our training change from when you're like, let's say 25 to when you're 40-ish?
Yeah. We should be smarter. Because hopefully we're all smarter as we get a little older.
Fingers crossed.
But
Right?
yeah, but I think it should be smart when you're 20. So that's, I mean, you've made those mistakes. So now you should have a better understanding of what you're after. But ideally, if you were 20 and you train smart, it's going to benefit you as you get older. But again, you're going to hate my answer because I feel like it's always going to be the answer, but it depends on the person. It depends on where they are. If they're a white belt in the gym and they train like a black belt, they might get hurt, right? If a person is a black belt and they have a good training age and they have a good base, now things can change. And it's probably more about if a person how much does a person value health versus strictly performance, right? If you value performance, so let's say you're the 40-year-old guy and you're like, dude, I don't give a shit about feeling good. I want to be a savage. I'm okay being sore. I'm okay hurting. I wouldn't recommend that. That wouldn't be, I don't know if I want to work with that guy, but then you say, okay, like we're going to get after it a little bit different versus someone. It's like, I want to have peace in my life. I want to feel good. I don't care about deadlifting 500 pounds. I don't care about, running up a mountain. They shift, and you probably want more of a balanced approach, that you want that yin yang, and maybe the pendulum tilts a little bit to one side occasionally, and then it comes back to the other side, and there's some type of undulation there, so that you're moving forward, you're making improvements, you're progressing, but then you're also allowing yourself to recover.
Nice. So, you mentioned your podcast, Higher Human. I know a part of that is, the mindset component of and those kinds of things. What are some mindset tips or tricks or things that you found that have really helped you become more zen, more a competent, capable person, and have kind of helped you in the gym and in life?
Well, breath work, mindfulness is huge. So with that, I think it's reading. I think it definitely helps to be progressing your knowledge of certain things if that interests you. A awareness of your fears, your insecurities, I think is really, really powerful, because I think a lot of limitations that we all have are rooted in fear, and that fear is not our fault, right? It's just we've just been conditioned, right? It's just, and sometimes it's really good. Like, these are good things. Like, we want to be successful because we want to make our parents proud, or right, these things that if you really take a step back and you evaluate in yourself, and you're not afraid to be open with, doors will open for you to progress. And I think those are really, really powerful things. Like, if you can take some time and really kind of try to unravel with those things, which can be difficult, right? But take some time to unravel those things, you'll have a clear understanding of yourself. I think it's like Bruce Lee has a quote that I always share, and it's I'm gonna butcher this because I'm not one to remember things verbatim, but it's like, understanding your fear is the beginning of really knowing, something like that. But if you really break that down and you think about it, like, he was an amazing martial artist and an amazing human, but he's a philosopher. And to me, that's so powerful, because it's stating that if you understand the roots of your fears, you gain an insight into yourself as a human, and then you can start to grow. So those would be a few things. Like, breath work, I think everybody can definitely benefit from just diving into that. And it's so simple but so hard, but there's so much that comes from that. And then just accepting that we all have fears, and not being too big of too manly or too ego driven to just say, like, that doesn't make me any less of a person, right? So those would be a few things that I would recommend.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a different perspective. But you know who Simon Sinek is, and like, start with why.
Yeah, for sure.
I always kind of get that same thing. Like, okay, I'm afraid of this, which is kind of like the top level stuff. And okay, I'm afraid of whatever. I'm afraid of this guy beating me up. All right, but what's the real thing? Because you're not actually afraid of that guy beating you up. It's more of, I'm afraid of feeling less than, or I'm afraid of, as a kid, I didn't feel like I was cool enough, or whatever those things. If you can get to those deep level, like the real why, that's where you can really start to make some changes and kind of make some breakthroughs.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. Yeah, it's powerful. It's hard to do. It's a lot of it is cultural based. I think a lot of it is just how we're taught it, to grind through things, and there's a balance there. I think there is a balance there. It's a and I've heard this be asked before. I don't remember where I heard it first, but it seems like it's a theme that reoccurs in stuff that I read and listen to. It's like, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do? Like, right? Like, if you knew you would become I don't know, or you knew you would get a black belt in jiu-jitsu, would you do it? Or, you know, what would be you knew you couldn't fail it, and what route would you go? Like, that's an interesting way of looking at it. What would you choose to do in your life? It's kind of a cool little drill to do.
For sure. All right. So we've been talking a little bit about mindset. So I know that there are a number of fighters that smoke a lot of weed. Um, and so how does smoking weed affect your training, or does it at all?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're not talking about the guy I work with, are you?
I mean, it,
Well, I'll tell you this. You know, talking about Sugar Sean, he's a smart man, and he doesn't abuse things. And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. And you're gonna get tons of different opinion on this. I think like smoking, I think can be an asset, because I think it can open you up to things that maybe you need to work on, right? But it can be abused, and that's that line with probably anything, any substance. You know, if you have a glass of wine at night to calm you down, I don't think it's a bad thing. If you have 7, it's a bad thing, and it's going to affect your training the next day. So if smoking too much is preventing you from training at your best the next day, then it's not a good thing. And during camp, it's like it can have a negative effect on your lung capacity for sure. So I think there's also that, is like, if you're a fighter or you're a jiu-jitsu athlete and you have a competition and you enjoy smoking marijuana, you probably want to keep in mind that you probably need to scale it back and make sure that it's not having a negative effect on your lung capacity.
so kind of staying in the substance kind of world, are there any supplements that you use or you think that would help fighters, jujitsu guys, those sorts of things?
Um, yeah, I think amino acids, right, as a recovery. I think that's can be, you know, really, really powerful. I think having like a carbohydrate supplement prior. So one of the ones that I've used and athletes have used by Targo, it's like a fast absorbing carbohydrate supplement that you can take depending on the person, but a lot of times it would be like a pre and then even like intra, because jiu-jitsu practice, your guys and girls are sweating, so right, like you're refueling your system, and then even a post, but really that optimizing of the fueling and optimizing of macronutrient, micronutrients, I think are really important for any athlete, understanding that. A protein supplement can be beneficial. Vitamin D every day, that's a big one. I think everybody should probably do a vitamin D and like an omega every day. That's kind of what I mean. And even creatine can be depending on, you know, somebody's goals. I think as a recovery, especially maybe say someone's cutting weight, I think creatine can come into play.
So, you know, you mentioned cutting weight. What have you seen as far as effective methods to cut weight, get ready for a fight? And what are some mistakes that you see that a lot of people do getting ready, doing that?
Probably number one is work with a professional. So that would be like, if it's such a science, and that is not my science. Like, I understand it enough to give at least some decent instruction, but I would also like kind of clarify that that isn't my passion. Movement training mindset is my passion. So I think working with somebody, understanding like really the intricacy of it, would be the most important piece. And that can be really messed up. Like, you see it, right, with the hydration aspect, and people that just mess it up, and then it's just everything is so connected. So you mess that up, and then your nervous system is off, and your head is off. So it's one of those things you don't want to mess with, for sure.
So, you know, you mentioned your passion is movement and those sorts of things. You know, how do you work with your clients, and do you only work with professional athletes, or do you work with like regular people too?
Yeah, everyone. My gym, we have 7 coaches right now. We have a physical therapist. We have We have all different types of people. My thing, really the passion that I have is for just helping people that want to be helped. So regardless of pro athlete, I want just a champion mindset, somebody that's embracing growth. So that could be a 75-year-old grandma that just shows up and appreciates the direction, appreciates the coaching. It could be a UFC fighter. It's really, to me, it's about that connection and that opportunity to help somebody feel better that I appreciate and embrace.
So if somebody wants to work with you, do they have to be like based here in Phoenix? Do they have to go to your gym, or do you do online stuff too?
Do online stuff as well. So we have kind of multiple pathways into that system. One of them is and my coaches will do a FaceTime or a Zoom evaluation, goal assessment, that type of thing. And then that leads into a program design that we build in our app. And there's a lot of different ways to go about that, right? I'll have people that will have a 12-week plan build the plan good. We're checking in. I have people that I check in with weekly that will do, right, Zoom calls, FaceTime calls every week. And then we also do some just virtual training where we'll actually log in and I'm coaching, or one of my coaches is coaching somebody remotely like this, or we're watching them. And it's kind of cool. I have a guy that I've worked with for a while that's in Scotland, and he's a 55-year-old CEO type guy, just really driven, very, very cool guy. And he's got a gym at his house, and he sets up his iPad, and I log on, and here we go. I'm basically coaching him over the phone, which is pretty cool.
Nice. So, where can people connect with you if they want to learn more, get you to train them, that sort of thing?
The Premier Fitness Systems. So Premier Fitness Systems that's my gym. We have a website, premierfitnesssystems.com. That's probably the main source I use right now for connecting with people. So you'd mentioned it earlier, but I think it's just Brandon_PFS. Make sure I'm not messing that up, right?
Yeah, that's what I have.
Yeah.
Between the two of us,
yeah.
Have it right.
Yeah. Brandon_PFS. So PFS as Premier Fitness Systems. And I try my best to connect with everybody on that platform. Like, I always appreciate the connection. So, if it's something that I can help with, I always try to give some guidance and to try to do that for free whenever I can. You had mentioned the Higher Human Project. That's going to be another resource for that. And my goal there is primarily a podcast, because I think these long format conversations are really cool, and it's just connecting with people that embrace growth. So the idea there is to try to help people understand, how do you make those steps, right? How do you embrace a life of like struggle provides opportunity, rather than wanting to be comfortable. It's like reframing your mindset that really struggle is opportunity to grow. So that's the goal there, is to connect with people that have embraced that. And then I'm doing that breathwork challenge that's going to be coming out soon. So that'll be another way to connect. And there, my goal there is to introduce a breathing practice in a very simple way that progresses over time, so that it's absorbable, so that people can actually, they can dive into it and it's not overwhelming. That's going to be the goal there.
Awesome. All right. So check you out on your website, premierfitnesssystems.com, Instagram at Brandon_PFS. You have the Higher Human podcast, and there's going to be other stuff around Higher Human, or is it primarily a podcast?
Yes, the vision there is to create a community that revolves around growth. So my goal there will be to have a platform where there will be training programs, there will be breathwork programs, and probably like a kind of where there's eventually you probably have a small subscription, right? So where you sign up for that and it's a monthly and you get access to all this stuff. That'll be the goal. So it'll be this holistic health, holistic performance spot for people to go, where there's breath work, there's mindfulness, there's just other things. That's really my ultimate passion is as I've embraced that in my life, I feel like it's helped me so much, and ultimately it's to try to give that back to people, because I think we all deserve it. We all it's hard now, right? Like, it's hard to know where to go. It's hard to know what's right. That I think is going to be a problem that continues to exist. Is you look up something online and you're like, just, it's overwhelming. Right? What do I do? So to try to provide some trusted resource, at least with the things that I feel like I'm qualified to talk on.
Yeah, for sure. That is the hard part, because whether it's the news or anytime you see a headline, you then have to Google that headline and find like 5 other things, or either like diet, workout, supplementation advice. That's part of what I'm doing, is I'm trying to find like the best people I can connect with to figure out what the hell should I be doing, somewhat selfishly, to make myself better, but then also like, how do I help others kind of bring all those resources together so we can figure out what is the right path going forward.
Yeah, man, I love it. It's cool what people are doing, like what you're doing. Bringing me on and providing this platform for me to talk. I really appreciate that, because I think you can tell when you meet somebody that you're a genuine human, and you're doing it for the right reason, that's what it's about, man.
Yeah, awesome. So, hey, Brandon, I know you're busy. We're filming this on a Sunday, and so I'm sure you got, things you got to do other than hang out and talk to us. But I definitely appreciate coming on.
Yeah, well, hey, I appreciate the time, the opportunity. Love what you're doing, like I said, and yeah, much love, man.
All right. So again, this is Brandon. Check him out on Instagram. Check out his Higher Human podcast. It's all coming in way. But thanks again, Brandon.